Rect Seba.
Rect Seba, African philosophy.
La philosophie africaine au fil du temps.
Corrects Connect Africa on Rect Seba, African philosophy. 6th episode of the DIOPICS series. The theme of the day is Sheikh Anta Diop and the idea of a new rationality. The crisis of scientific rationality, of which we spoke in the previous episode, is in itself a challenge for philosophers, more so because this crisis is putting a great strain on philosophical rationality itself. According to Diop, and I quote, "Today, philosophy is going through a very difficult period that we are forced to call a crisis. Some thinkers do not hesitate to talk about the death or the end of philosophy. The discomfort comes from the fact that the main source of philosophy seems to be dried up. Philosophical production decreases in quantity and especially in quality." End of quote. Dear listeners, according to the classical African calendar, we are at the 28th day of the 3rd month of the Peret season of the year 6254. May this day bring you peace and serenity. We continue on our exploration of the philosophical thoughts of Sheikh Anta Diop. Thank you for joining us in this trip to the world of ideas and reality. Hotep. The crisis that shakes philosophy has made epistemologist Jean Toussaint de Saint-Exupéry say, and I quote, "The philosopher could seek to find a thin thread of voice. It will no longer be the voice of the past, the one that proclaimed the truth for all. The philosopher will no longer state knowledge." End of quote. In the same vein, Martin Heidegger proclaims in 1967 the end of philosophy. It would have died by suffocation, gradually crumbling and dissolving in the various sciences. Sheikh Anta Diop has a different reading. Philosophy is not in crisis because it is linked to science, but rather for having deserted the field of science. Diop writes, and I quote, "According to some authors, philosophy without science is an empty speech. This judgment may be excessive, but it can be said that science has always been and remains the main source of inspiration for philosophy. For this very reason, philosophy will always exist, but perhaps it will become more and more difficult to philosophize." End of quote. As a historian and philosopher of science, Diop shows how the two disciplines have always traveled together from antiquity to the threshold of the contemporary period. In the ancient period, for example, philosophers of nature elaborated their interpretations of the world based on scientific data. Similarly, The development of the exact sciences has always had a metaphysical extrapolation. The scientific thesis of geocentrism has inspired and nourished for over 2,000 years a certain philosophy of man, the central man of the universe, the man, the being for whom the universe is created. Today, the development of the natural sciences can still breathe new energy into philosophy and inspire a new philosophy of man. According to Diop, and I quote, "Probably the great renewal of the philosophy that is expected will come also from the natural sciences such as molecular biology, genetics, etc. Indeed, the discoveries made during the past 2 decades have always made a powerful contribution to renewing man's metaphysics and to rendering obsolete a good deal of previous philosophical work based on mere speculations." End of quote. An objection may be raised against the Senegalese philosopher. He seems to support the idea that philosophy is merely an appendage or a simple sounding board of science. However, strictly speaking, Diop has a much more noble idea of philosophy. Of course, he emphasizes the close relationship that must exist between science and philosophy, but he understands this relationship as that which exists between 2 communicating vessels. It is to the philosophers, and especially to the African philosophers, that he entrusts the heavy task of elaborating a new rationality to get science and philosophy out of the impasse. He writes, and I quote, "To advance a real knowledge in the new rationality, it will be necessary to build it step by step, having an acute awareness of the difficulty and the singularity of the problem. African philosophers must participate in the construction of this new theory of knowledge, the most advanced and the most exciting of our time. This is a first positive task. All conditions seem to come together for an unprecedented epistemological revolution, for the complete change of our paradigm of the universe." End of quote. The first task of philosophers is therefore to propose a new theory of knowledge capable of provoking a radical paradigm shift and an epistemological revolution. But there are 3 other tasks. First, reinventing a rationality that reconciles man with himself. According to Diop, the requirement of this rationality meets a double necessity: to overcome the apocalyptic anxiety sown by authors like Spengler and to give a meaning to life, to existence. Second, reinventing a dynamic interdisciplinary epistemology between science and philosophy. African philosophers, writes Diop, and I quote, "are able to participate in the construction of this new philosophy, which will be largely the result of the contact of philosophical reflection and science." End of quote. Third, the last task, rewriting the history of philosophy, especially that of the beginnings in antiquity, and to show through this new version of history how philosophies older than the Greek one have brought worthwhile solutions to the problematic of the relations between man and the universe, between consciousness and cosmos, between the various bodies of knowledge. If we take these tasks seriously, philosophy can be reborn from its ashes and play its full role in the advent of a new consciousness and a new rationality. But this will require fundamental rethinking of the didactics of philosophy, especially in our African universities. Dear friends, here we end our day's journey. We will meet again next week. I wish you all that is good, beautiful, and perfect. In our classical language, it says, Keth, Nebet, Neferet. See you soon.
Rect Seba.
Rect Seba, African philosophy.
La philosophie africaine au fil du temps.
Correct Connect Africa on Rect Seba, African philosophy.
Oh, sad and cold, far high in the heavens you soar. My soul is soon to follow you back to yesterday.